Okay, so Victor gave us a framework in which we can think about sensory physiology. And now I'm going to tell you about one of our most important senses, vision. So if you think about if you had to lose one sense, you probably wouldn't want it to be vision, right? And so let's think about why vision is important. So how did you get here today? You had to navigate a new place, maybe you hadn't been here before, figure out where we are and how to get to this room. Not only did you have to see where you're going, but you also had to avoid some dangers, like crossing the road. You don't want to get hit by a car. Maybe there's a hole in the ground or some ice. Probably not ice. But you had to make sure that you got here in one piece. And then, of course, we're still animals, and we still need to find things to eat. So maybe we're not a lion hunting on the savannah, but we have to make our way to the refrigerator and open the door and pick out which flavor ice cream we want to get. Or you can get a healthy apple. As humans, faces are also extremely important to us. Not only can you look at this face and say, hey, that's my sister, but you can look at these two faces and realize immediately that the one on the left is an unhappy sister and the one on the right is a happy sister. So social communication is very important for us humans, and this is one important thing that vision allows us to do. And last, vision makes us who we are. We can enjoy things like art, or if you're not into art, there's also action movies. Okay, so we learned a little bit about how senses work, but now let's figure out how vision works. So let's use Victor's schematic of the stimuli, receptor, sensory path, center to perception. So what is the visual stimuli that we see every day? Light, right. So, light. And then does anyone know the receptor that we use to see light in our eye? Photoreceptor. Some of you might have noticed it's written on your page. Photoreceptor. Okay, and then next we need to have this light stimuli being converted into the electrical signal, the action potential. So this takes place in a specific sensory neuron called you can read it off the page if you want to. Retinal ganglion cells. Yeah, exactly. And these retinal ganglion cells project to the brain. And specifically, there's a cortex in the brain that's important for visual information called the, visual cortex. So this transduction of light into an action potential that's sent to the visual cortex is a type of transduction, specifically for vision, phototransduction. So all this kind of makes sense. If we put everything together, we have lights, camera, action, potential, sight. Thanks, guys. Okay. So Victor also told us about how structure can inform function. So let's take a look at the human eye to try to figure out how we convert light into electrical stimulus that we can perceive. So take a look at this right here. It's pretty familiar to us. We know we have a pupil. This thing is spherical. So where do you think the photoreceptors lie in the eye? Sorry? Yeah, near the optic nerve is in the back of the eye, but specifically there's a layer of cells in the back called the retina. And the retina is actually a very complex organization of cells. Lots of cells are stacked up on top of each other, and we'll go into that in detail later. So we have photoreceptors at the back of the eye. How does the light get to these photoreceptors? Cones are a type of photoreceptor, but yeah, so light has to enter the back. I mean, we don't see the back of our eye, do we? We only see this part here. So light has to interact with this surface here. So light will come in through the pupil, gets focused by the lens and other muscles, and then is shone onto the back of the eye in the retina. And from here, the retina will perform phototransduction to retinal ganglion cells that project to the optic nerve. So we're going to go through that in a little bit more detail because, like I said, the retina is actually very complicated. So imagine that this is you looking at nothing. And then all of a sudden, a piece of cake appears. And you say, I really want to see what that piece of cake looks like because, you know, I might want to eat it, but if it looks gross, I don't want to eat it. So we need to see this piece of cake. So what's the first thing that we need to see anything?
The light.
Yeah, we need light. We need some sort of stimulus. So we have a light source. This light doesn't go directly into our eye, but it bounces off the piece of cake, enters our eye through the pupil and lens, yes, and then shines to the back of the eye in this layer of cells called the
Retina.
retina. Great. Okay, so now we're going to zoom in. Don't be panicked by all the different layers, but we're going to go through it step by step. So just for orientation's sake, the light is traveling upwards. So at the very back of the retina, we have our photoreceptors. And someone mentioned cones, right? So we have two different types of photoreceptors, rods and cones. These cones and rods sense the light and project information through these interneurons. There's all sorts of different interneurons, and they have various roles, but all this information eventually gets sent to the retinal ganglion cells, which is, remember, the site of phototransduction. So this is where light is converted into an electrical signal, action potentials, that are sent through the optic nerve to the brain, and specifically the visual cortex. And then we get a perception of cake. So we get to see this piece of cake. We get to see, it's like a layered cake. It looks pretty good. It's vanilla. I think I would eat it. So you can kind of think of the retina with these different layers, similar to the layers of a cake. So let's go into more detail about these interesting receptors, photoreceptors. We know there's two types of receptors, rods and cones. Does anyone know why they're called rods and cones? They look like rods and cones. Exactly. A lot of scientists are somewhat unoriginal and decide to name things exactly how they look, but that's actually very useful for us. Does anyone know what role rods and cones have in the eye?
Color filter. It's like red filter.
Yeah, so you're talking about like colors, light. So both of these photoreceptors had different roles. Rods are important for sensing light in dim light conditions. So like when you're trying to get to the refrigerator at night to find ice cream, you're using your rods. And they're also responsible for things like motion detection. Cones, meanwhile, come in 3 different flavors and are important for sensing color and are important for vision in bright light conditions. So basically, in humans, we have red cones, green cones, and blue cones, because these cones absorb light at a specific wavelength using a specific dye that allows them to sense that type of light. So red cones would see what type of light? Red, yeah. Green cones, green. Blue cones, blue. And all of them together, we would see what color light?
White.
Yeah, exactly. Good job. Okay, so we talked a little bit about our own human eyes, but just take a look at all the different types of eyes in the animal kingdom. Do you guys know what all these things are? Like, what is this guy?
That's a fly.
Yeah, it's a fly eye. Good job. What about this?
Dog.
Dog.
Fish.
I think it's an octopus. This guy?
Gorilla.
Yeah, some sort of monkey.
Orangutan.
I think this is actually an elephant, yeah.
Oh my God.
Good job, guys. You got a lot of them. So why do you think that there needs to be so many different types of eyes in the animal kingdom? Yeah, right. So not everyone is a human. Not everyone, yeah, go ahead.
Isn't there that fish that has like a bunch of photoreceptors like overheat?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Okay, stay tuned to the end. Yeah, it's called the mantis shrimp. Good job.
Yes.
So someone said adaptations, and that's true because not everyone's a human. Not everyone is walking around in 2 feet during the daytime, doesn't have claws or sharp teeth like us. So animals will adapt to their environments, and specifically they will develop the structure of an eye to allow them to perform a certain function. So we're going to think about some examples. So what sort of animals do you notice on this slide?
Hawk. Squirrel. Fish. Squirrel?
It's a bunny.
There is a squirrel here, though. Okay, so you guys can identify some animals, but can you tell me what they're doing, what their environments are like?
Oh.
Yeah, so this hawk is chasing the squirrel, right? So what type of animal is the hawk called?
Bird.
As a chaser, as like a hunter. Predator, there we go. Okay, so the hawk is a predator. And what do you call the little squirrel guy? Prey, exactly. So you can imagine that predators need different eyes than prey. And we're going to talk about that in detail. So what about this jaguar? It's a predator, but what type of light condition does it live in? Darkness. Darkness. These guys are nocturnal. In contrast to a bunny that lives in bright light conditions, right? Does anyone know the term for something that is active during the day? So we have nocturnal and diurnal. Yeah, great job. And then we have these guys here. So can you guys, when you go swimming and you open your eyes, can you see underwater? A little bit. It's really blurry, right? And the reason that is that the molecules in water are packed more tightly together than they are in air. So light travels differently through water than it does through air. Yeah, it looks like it's bent, exactly. So that's the perfect example, yeah, refraction. So they have different refractive indexes. So these fish have eyes that are specially developed to see underwater. So we got all of these terms, right? Predator, prey, nocturnal, diurnal, and aquatic. So these are some examples of how the environment of an animal can shape the physiology of the eye. We can split vision up into several categories. We already talked about color vision and dim light condition or black and white vision. Another way we can split it up is monocular versus binocular vision. So what does monocular mean or monocle mean?
You can see like around it more.
So it's like one, right? Mono is one. Like the guy from Monopoly has one monocle. What about binocular?
They see around their prey.
They see everything around them like 360.
So you guys actually have it flipped. So monocular vision, like you said, is monocle means one. And basically what happens is that these animals, mainly prey, have eyes that are on opposite sides of their head. So like instead of our eyes being here, it'd be like our eyes right here, which would be weird, right? And the reason it's called monocular is because one eye covers that entire visual field or is placed in space. So if you look at this pigeon, imagine the black part is its head and the eyes are on the opposite sides of its head. It can see in front of it and it can also see like almost 180 degrees in this area. But the visual fields from either of its eyes don't overlap. So the vision that it sees is primarily from one eye at a time or at the same time. So these animals obviously have an advantage. And what's that advantage?
They can see more.
Yeah, they can see all around them, kind of like a panorama. However, they don't have very much overlap. Binocular animals, like this owl, are normally predators. And their visual fields overlap because their eyes are in the front of their face. So are we binocular or monocular?
Monocular.
We're binocular. So we're actually more like predators than prey.
See the sides here.
Yeah, but mainly the most important difference is that the visual fields overlap. And the overlap allows us to see, does anyone know? Depth, right. So having two eyes looking at the same place allows us to do actually a calculation between the distance with this eye and this object, and this eye and this object, and that allows us to determine how far that object is away from us. So it's very cool. So we're binocular animals. So we talked a little bit about different animals in the animal kingdom. We know that we're more like predators than prey. We have binocular vision. But have you ever wondered what like your favorite dog sees? So obviously dogs can see, but yeah, so I'm going to tell you now that every animal has a different combination of photoreceptors in terms of the identity of the cones, the number of rods, and the density of these things. So here's a question for you. What combination of cones do you think a dog has? And we're going to vote. Oh, wait, hang on. I had to turn this on. OK, I think you can start voting now. OK, keep voting. We have 14, I think. Did everyone vote? OK, most people voted. One less second to vote. OK, we're going to go with this. So you guys thought, wow, a pretty even split. So you thought either red, green, or red, blue, and yellow, or none of the above. I'm going to tell you that one person got it. So it's actually C, blue and yellow. Who got it? Good job. OK, so, oh, sorry, hide results. So what does your dog see versus you? So we can see this diverse color spectrum up here. Dogs see in shades of blue and yellow. So they actually have only 2 cones. So we're trichromatic. we can see 3 colors, and they're dichromatic. They see 2 colors. Yeah.
So my dog doesn't like the pink toy, just likes the shade.
Yeah, probably. So he can't see pink. He might see shades of brightness and darkness. So their rods have similar sensitivity to light as we do. So if a dog were to look at this picture and you were to look at this picture, this is what you would see, and this is what a dog would see. So they also have, blurrier vision, and that's because they have a lower density of photoreceptors in the back of their eye. So we can see better than your dog can.
I thought it was the opposite. But what about when they like hunt, like when they were old?
So they use other senses like smell,
So
hearing.
they just close their eyes.
Yeah. So vision is not their most important sense.
So she doesn't even see my face.
So let's talk about animals with other amazing vision. So dogs actually have worse vision than we do, but some animals have better vision than we do. So take a look at some of these animals. So we have reindeers up here. So reindeers are super cool, and they live in very cold areas. And on the ground oftentimes is snow. And if anyone has been out in the snow and it's really bright, like what do you look like? Usually like squinting, right? Because it's so bright. And so we have sunglasses, but reindeer don't, although that would be really cool. So instead, they have this type of dye in the back of their eye that will absorb ambient light. So they don't have to squint in really bright light conditions. Additionally, they have an extra ability to see UV light. So when we go outside, we can see ourselves get a sunburn, but we can't see the light that's actually the UV light that's hitting our skin. These reindeer can see that light. Yeah, it's pretty cool. A lot of insects actually can also see UV light. So dragonflies can see UV light, as well as butterflies and many other insects. Dragonflies also have really cool eyes in that their eyes process visual information very rapidly. So we can watch a TV, right, because we have slow eyes actually. And you guys have probably, taken a video of a TV or something, and you see these like still frames or things moving or scrolling across the screen. And that's because the camera that you're using captures frames at a faster rate than your eyes can do this. So you probably have heard like 60 hertz TV, something like that. So that means that there are 60 frames per second that are popping up on your TV that make it look like a video, like a constant stream of motion. However, that's just because our eyes are slow. So if you try to show this dragonfly your favorite action movie, it'd be so bored because it'd just see one picture, pause, one picture, pause, one picture, pause. Yeah.
So it's like those books that you flip through really quick.
Yeah, it's kind of like a flip book, exactly. That's a good analogy. So there are also some cool animals. This is a goat. Its pupils are kind of creepy. They're very wide. And do you guys have any guess as to what their special visual ability is? Think about like monocular animals that can see all around them. They don't see up and down very well, but they can see almost 360 degrees. They can see 320 degrees around them. So it doesn't even have to move its head. So if a goat is staring at you and it's not moving, it's because it can see you very well. And then we have these four-eyed fish, which you can't see in this picture very well, but this is actually the surface of the water. So you notice something that's weird right away, like the eyes are at the top of its head. And the reason it doesn't have 4 eyes, it only has 2 eyes. The reason it's called four-eyed fish is that it can see both above water and below. Oh, great, thanks, Jenny. So yeah, so there's the surface of water here. They can see both above water and below water at the same time. So we talked about the different refractive indexes, and their eyes actually can see both. So that's super cool. And then someone up here was mentioning the animal with like many cones, and yes, this is the mantis shrimp. So this crazy clown-like guy here can see a lot of different colors. Does anyone know how many cones he has?
33.
That's a little bit too much, but
23. Is it 18?
Yeah, so anywhere between like 14, 16, somewhere around there. So scientists actually are still arguing about categorizations of these different cone identities. So, they have at least 5 times more cones than we do. So imagine all the colors they can see. Yeah.
Is it possible that like a human might be born with extra cones? Does that occur?
Yeah, so actually there is an instance where I think it's only on the Y chromosome. Females actually have better color detection, and I don't know if they have a special cone per se, but it has something different about their vision, and it allows them to detect more shades and variations of colors. So there are some human genetic changes. Okay, so we've covered how humans see things, the structure of the eye, animals with poor vision, animals with great vision. And now we're actually going to test ourselves a little bit. So I have to tell you, we don't have the best eyes in the animal kingdom. You guys saw that from the last slide. So we can actually be tricked in a lot of different ways. And let's spend some time to see some really cool optical illusions. So here's the first one. What I want you to do is stare at the cross in the bird for like 15 seconds. Notice that the back of the bird is green, the belly is red, and the other parts are blue. So just stare at that thing for 15 seconds. Okay, and then I want you to quickly look at the cross in the cage.
Oh wow.
It's like whiter.
What
Whiter than that.
do you guys see?
I just see a white bird, just a white outline.
There's a bird in the cage. Exactly. And that's right, nothing popped up. You didn't do anything. But your eye is actually working very hard. Does anyone have any idea of how this works? So think about, look at the colors on this bird, and then look at the colors in the when you like look into the cage. Yeah, they're kind of opposite, right? So the reason that happens is when you look at this bird, which cones are being activated when you look at the back? The green ones, and which ones when you're looking at the stomach? Right. So then when you look at a white surface, which cones are activated? All of them. So what happens is that when you stare at this picture here, those green cones get tired. Oh, sorry. I don't know. The green cones get tired. So when you look at the white, we have activation of red, green, and blue, but green are tired. So what two colors dominate? Blue and red. So what color is the back of the bird when you look at it in the cage? Try it again. So just stare at this for like 5 seconds, and
Am I
then
allowed to blink?
try not to blink. So if you look closely, the back is what color when you transfer your gaze?
Oh.
It's just white. It's always red.
So yeah, it's kind of pinky, right? So this is a combination between blue and red cones. So we call this phenomenon visual adaptation.
Still see it now.
Yeah. So this is an after image of the bird.
Oh, you have to blink a lot. No, really.
Okay, guys, so that's one cool optical illusion. I have some here to show you as well. And so we're going to navigate to a website that's useful. Okay, does anyone know who this is?
Oh, I know what this is.
Margaret Thatcher. She was Prime Minister of the UK at one point. So look at these faces. You can tell that, you know, they look pretty normal. The one on the right looks kind of strange. Like, it looks like there's squares around her eye or something. And then let's rotate it. So what changed?
Face.
So you saw that we didn't move any parts of her face, we just flipped it upside down. The reason this works is that as humans, like I mentioned before, social perception of individuals is really important. So we actually have a portion of the brain that's dedicated to looking at faces. And when a face is upside down, we don't really see that very much in nature, right? So it's out of context. And we instead process this face like an object. So we don't see anything different. We know it has eyes, a mouth, and a nose. When we flip it upside down, or right side up, I should say, and if all of it's together in context, it looks pretty different, right? So this is how this solution works. Okay, let's try another guy. So look at this checkerboard. I know you think I'm going to trick you, and I am, but which is darker, A or B?
I'm supposed to say A.
You know you're supposed to say A, exactly.
Oh, no, they are the same color.
So
Oh, I see.
look what happens when we do this.
Wow. What?
So I'm going to take it off
What's surrounding it?
and turn it on. Yeah, so it's about what's surrounding it. So this pillar is casting a shadow. And we know that when a shadow is cast on something, color is distorted, right? It makes everything look darker. So what your brain does is it notices that something's darker, and it tries to fix that. So it projects what it thinks should be there. So even though they're the same color, because it's in the shadow, your brain predicts that it should be lighter than it actually is. Yeah.
So I can do some weird thing with my eyes where I shake it, kind of question it, but I also kind of make everything blurry. When everything goes blurry, I can see like colors. And then
Oh, interesting.
Oh, I can see that.
When I just blur my eyes, I can see
Yeah, so basically if you disrupt the context of this picture, the two colors look the same.
Yeah, they look the same. I don't see colors, I don't see shapes.
Okay, one last cool one.
Okay. I see the colors only. Like, this is very blue. It's just like a blue rectangle.
Okay, so I don't even have to tell you what to do. Just look at this.
Oh, I've seen this one before.
What do you see is happening?
It's like turned black right now.
Yeah, some of you guys are moving your heads like this. So it looks like this picture is moving even though it isn't. And actually scientists don't have a super great explanation for why this is the case. It has something to do with edges and motion detection, but maybe you will grow up one day and figure out how it works. Okay, so we're going to move on to something else. So all of you guys have a piece of paper, and then there's a cross and a dot. So can you pull out that piece of paper? Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to hold the piece of paper in front of you with a dot on your left-hand side. Okay, so hold it at arm's length. And then what you need to do is close your right eye and look at the cross with your left eye. So keep your gaze focused on the cross, but kind of pay attention to the dot a little bit. And I want you to move the paper back and forth slowly until you see something crazy happen.
Yeah, the dot disappear.
Yeah, so the dot disappears. Does everyone see that?
It's like my nose is very
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to like
Can't figure it out.
No, you have to close one eye. You have to close the right eye.
Oh,
your right eye.
I don't even have to move it.
Okay, now when I shake my eyes, I can see it both times.
Interesting. You have a special adaptation.
Spot.
My
Yeah.
eye is moving back and forth, so I'm seeing both things.
Right, exactly.
At the same time, 'cause I'm
So did everyone see it? Did everyone get it? No? Okay, so close your right eye, look at the cross with your left eye, and then move the paper back and forth.
What? Oh boy, I don't know.
You might have to move it closer to your face. Like mine is like right here. You see it? Okay, cool. Does anyone have any? Someone mentioned blind spot. Do you guys know how this works? Why does?
blind spot, right?
What was that? Yeah, the optic nerve, exactly. So this is a picture of our eye. We talked before about these, like here are your photoreceptors, right? So the light's shining here, it's scattering all over the place. And all of these nerves leave the eye through the optic nerve. So this optic nerve takes up space. You can't have photoreceptors on top of the optic nerve, right? So actually, there's a part of our visual field that's always empty. Like when we're looking right now, there are blank spots in our visual field. But similar to that optical illusion with the pillar and the checkerboard, our brain will fill in what it thinks should be there. We also have an advantage in that we are a binocular animal, so we have two eyes. So your brain is able to compute a very realistic illusion of what's actually there. So the next time someone says, I need to see it to believe it, you can tell them that maybe you still shouldn't believe it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next demo that has to deal with binocular vision and depth perception.